Congratulations on reaching the end of Module 1, and in this module we learned a lot of things about the command line basics using the acronym COMMAND. Under the letter C, we learned about the console, also known as the terminal. We learned how to open the terminal by right-clicking the desktop and choosing Open in Terminal, or by using the Show Apps icon and searching for Terminal. And we also learned another way that you can do it is to press Ctrl-Alt-T, and that will also open the terminal. Once here, we talked about the terminal emulator and how it relates to the GUI, and how we could tell what terminal emulator we're using by looking here under the hamburger menu, selecting About, and seeing that we're using the GNOME terminal. We also talked about how the terminal differs from the shell, and we can see what shell we're using, and the shell is the program that actually executes your commands. The terminal emulator is just where we type them in. So to see this shell, we run echo $shell, and we can see that we're using the bash shell. We can also see what other shells are available in our system by running cat/etc/shells, and we see many there, and how to change our shell by using the chsh-s bin sh if that's what we wanted to change to. We'll not do that now. And then under the letter O for orientation, we learned how to find out information about our system. So we can run uname-a, and that will tell us the Linux kernel version that we're using. We can use cat/proc/version, and I have to spell that right. And we can also see the kernel version, and we can see we're using Ubuntu 22.04. And we can also see the host name for our system, and mine is demo. We can see the user we're logged in as with the whoami command, or by running echo $user. And we can see the current working directory by running pwd, which stands for print working directory. And we can see there that we're in my user's home folder. And we also talked about that we can run IPA to see our IP address. So we learned a lot of useful information about our system and about how to see information about our system with the letter O. And then in the letter M, we talked about mapping the file system and how the entire Linux file system starts at root. So let's go to CD, let's CD into the root folder, and you can run pwd and see we're in root. Then we can run ls to list the contents of that directory, and here you can see the top level directories that we talked about. At least we talked about some of them. You could also see these by clicking on Files in your GUI, and we can go to Other Locations and go to Ubuntu, and you can see here also your top level directories, and we talked about some second level directories, and also how everything in Linux is a file, and we illustrated that in the dev directory, and how in the dev directory you could even see your hard drives like SDA, SDA1 being the partitions, SDA2, and so you can see that information. Then with the mobility section, the second letter M, which stood for mobility, we talked about how to use CD. So suppose we want to go to cd/var/log, we can do that and check it with pwd, and that's where we are. And then we talked about how you can go home at any time you want with just the cd command. You could also run cd$home, or you could do cd tilde, and that will take you home as well. But the cd command is an easy way to go there, and we can check that, and we are back in our user home folder. Now, we can also use cd- if we want to go back to the last place we were. So if we run that, we'll see that now we are in var log, because that's the last place. So cd- will take you right back to where you were. And then we use cd ... to go up a folder. Now we're in var. We can do cd ... again and go up one directory to the parent directory again. And now we see we're back in root. And so that's a good way to navigate around the system. And we learned all of that under the letter M for mobility. Then under the letter A, we talked about absolute paths and relative paths. An absolute path is when we start with root and go somewhere like var log. And a relative path, let's say we're in our home folder, as we are now, and you do cd documents, and we don't start with root, and that will put us in our documents folder. And so that's a relative path. An absolute path can get you there from anywhere in the system. A relative path depends on where you are. And then under the letter N, we talked about Nimble Navigation, how to efficiently move around the terminal. So let's go home now. And we talked about many things. For instance, we could do CD doc and tab completion to quickly move around inside the terminal. We can use our up arrow to start scrolling back through our commands to find one we ran earlier. We could use our history command to see commands we've ran earlier, and then using the exclamation point and the number, for instance, this number 61, we use exclamation point 61 and we run that command, pwd, and it will show us the command that we ran. And we also talked about if we've typed a command in and we want to go back to the beginning, you do Control A. And if you want to go back to the end, you do Control E. So Control A, the beginning, Control E goes to the end. And there's several things that we learned about navigating around in the system, and we talked about Nimble Navigation. Now under the letter D, we talked about discovery, and we talked primarily, let's go back to our home folder, we talked about built-in commands and external commands. And we noticed how you could see that by running, for instance, type CD. It tells us it's a built-in command. But if we run type-ALS, we will see that it's an external command because it gives us the location of the binary. It gives us the location of the program. And we could also see that with the which command, which ls, tells us where this is located. But if we ran which cd, which is a built-in command, we don't see anything because there is no external file that needs to be ran. Next, we talked about the way the system knows how to find those commands, and that is with the path variable. And we see these directories that you can find when you run a program. Your system is going to look through these directories one by one until it finds the program. And we discussed how if you want to change the variable to add in another path, you set the variable with path. You set it equal to the old variable so that you don't just overwrite all that content, and you use colon and say we want to set this to look in my scripts. We learned how to do that, and we can set that there. So we learned a lot about command line basics, and I hope that this was very beneficial to you. And this has just been a summary of the things that we learned to remind you of how far we've come. I'd also like to take a few moments to tell you about some additional resources for this class. If you'd like to support this channel, and if you've benefited from this class and from this C model teaching framework, and would like additional resources to go along with Module 1, then you can visit my Etsy shop at the URL that you see on your screen. And here you'll be able to purchase and download the following PDFs. There's a Module 1 quiz that consists of 10 questions that go along with this module, and it also has an answer key and explanations for each answer. Additionally, there's a Module 1 quick reference guide, and it will go through the main commands that we covered for each letter. You might look at this sort of as a cheat sheet to help give you a quick refresher. And then finally, there's a Module 1 full lesson PDF that goes through all the material from the class that we taught in the videos, but also some additional information. And so if you'd like to go a little bit deeper, you'll find that additional information in this full lesson PDF where we explain concepts in greater depth. I would also like to encourage anyone who would like to use this material in a classroom setting to teach other people Linux that there's also a licensed copy of each one of these PDFs on my Etsy shop, and it allows you to distribute these documents to up to 30 students. And so I hope that maybe the C model framework has helped you learn, and maybe it could help other people learn this material as well. Well, I want to thank you again for joining us in this module. I would encourage you to join us in the next module, which is about file management. Thank you for your time.